Warm welcome, everybody. It's quite unique when we get together without any clear idea what's going to happen, without any expectation. Or even if there is an expectation, it's held lightly, not tightly. When you don't have a pressure to learn anything, understand anything. Which is why I've called this session spontaneous and senseless. Doesn't have to make sense. Doesn't have to be beneficial. Doesn't have to improve your life. It occurred to me how sometimes the meaningless things we do are the most memorable, right? Think back to your times in school and college. The most meaningless things, time spent with friends, things that didn't necessarily make sense, things that didn't necessarily, um, they weren't practically beneficial, but they're some of the most cherished parts of your life. You just went ahead and did something, even though for many people it didn't make sense. So could it be that something that you found confusing or struggled with from early on in your life, something that you found confusing or struggled with from early on in your life, could it be that that is an important theme of your life? In other words, instead of looking to other people for the meaning of life, purpose of life, what if you look at your own life and say something that actually bugged you, confused you, troubled you? There's some kind of clue there. That's the meaning of your life. That's the purpose of your life. When something bugs and troubles us, it demands all our attention. Can't get away from it. So, for example, something that bugged me a lot early on in my life is how come I don't do what I know is good for me? I know certain things are good for me, but I don't do them. In the beginning, you can blame others and, oh, there's no time, oh, I'm busy. But soon enough, you say, okay, now that these are just excuses. It's not always true that I don't have time. It's not always true that it's because of other people, right? That was a very big mystery for me. If I know something's good for me, I even feel good when I do it. Still don't do it. when I know there's a higher joy, pleasure available. Higher in the sense it's blameless. I don't feel guilty afterwards. I don't feel tired afterwards. I don't feel exhausted. It's not a depletion, it's a nourishment in some way. Certain pleasures are depleting, certain things are energizing, rejuvenating. So my big question was, how come there's this gap between what I know and what I live? So could it be that in my case, this is an important question to keep alive? One thing I've recognized is questions are more important than answers. Answers are like a full stop. I know. And so you stopped looking. But questions keep us curious. And you can kind of uncover deeper and deeper things when you stay with the question. Someone once said that if you want a high quality life, choose high quality questions. Let me give you an example of a poor quality question. It's just two words. Why me? And you go through your life, why me? मुझे क्यों होता है? Well, if you have that question, then you'll have a poor quality life. A simple example of a high quality question is, what can I bring to this? And there are many more. So what if it's not as mysterious as we imagine? What if it's been looking at us in our face the whole time? That which gives us joy, that which troubles us. And that's it. Why do we require approval from others, validation from religion, spirituality, spiritual teachers, motivational speakers, people who you think have figured out their life? Why do you look to books? Why not keep it simple? Years back, I was reflecting on this question. What's the purpose of life? And one thing I've learned is that you can reflect through thinking. That's one way. But even more powerful is you reflect through non-thinking. In other words, you just drop it. You ask the question and you just get quiet. Quiet doesn't mean you have to have absolutely no thought. You don't necessarily follow any train of thought. If you drop a stone in the ocean, where there are so many waves, hardly any ripples. You drop a small stone in a perfectly still pond or lake, the ripple goes to the edge of that lake or pond. So when the mind is relatively quiet still, if you were to ask a question, the ripple goes all the way to the edge. So when I ask myself that question, what's the purpose of life? I got a very beautiful, at least to me it was beautiful, a very beautiful and simple answer. Purpose of life is to be alive. What does it mean to be alive? What makes you come alive? Where are you most alive? Are you alive in the company of animals? Are you alive on the top of a mountain? Are you alive with close friends, having meaningful conversation? Are you alive when you're doing things for others? Are you alive when you're creative? Are you alive when you're in some way reaching out for excellence, becoming good at something? Are you alive when you're learning, or when you're teaching, or when you're serving, or when you're meditating, or when you're doing pranayama? What makes you come alive? Are you alive when you hold the space for someone who's going through a hard time? What makes you come alive? There's this movie that became very popular in its time, Hurt Locker. It's an action movie. And it's a movie about a bomb disposal squad. This man who's an expert at disposing bombs. Now, can you imagine a more stressful profession? You have to prevent a bomb from detonating. It can go off any moment. And your job is to save the lives of all the people there by deactivating that bomb. And this guy is one of the best in the field. So the movie is about this guy who goes and stressful situation after stressful situation. He has to go and decide which wire to cut. How do you deactivate the bomb? Can you imagine a more stressful profession than that? You could die any minute. And yet, his demeanor is perfectly calm. He's like a surgeon. Even though death is staring at him in the face, he's like a surgeon. And he analyzes the situation. And he puts off bomb after bomb after bomb in that movie. But here's what's interesting. At the end of that, toward the end of the movie, he comes back home. He has to go shopping with his wife. And they go to the supermarket. And the wife is busy buying stuff. She says, just go and buy some cornflakes. So he takes a shopping trolley to the cornflakes aisle. And as you know, in supermarkets, it's a long aisle of cornflakes. He's stressed out. He's very stressed out deciding which cornflakes to buy. What's the right cornflake? 20 brands away. Putting off a bomb didn't make him stressed. Selecting the right cornflakes makes him stressed. You see? What makes you come alive? What if the purpose of life is to be alive? And then coming back to my question, which I shared a while back, why is it that many of us know, we may not have the full picture, but we have a good picture of what makes us come alive? Eating in a certain way, sleeping in a certain way, moving in a certain way, being with certain people, doing certain things, living in certain places, certain inner attitudes. We know that makes us come alive. Why don't we do it? Why don't we do it enough? And this is just my question. You may have different questions in your life. But the point is that what if it's really quite simple? What if we don't complicate it so much? I have a friend, Nilima, and when I was talking to her some years back, she was talking about how she's very concerned about women in Asia. Women in Asia. The state of women in Asia. How we are held back culturally, religiously, socially, in so many ways. The challenges that women face in Asia. And I was amazed that while people are bothered about paying their bills and people like them or not and what to wear for the next party, her whole focus is women in Asia. And because she's thinking at that level, she's working at that level. So she ends up working with, very powerful leaders, influencers, uh, authors, business leaders. When you think at that level, you influence at that level. So she writes books at that level, has workshops at that level, attends conferences at that level. So it made me think that what level are you choosing to operate at? And that concern of yours, that care of yours, that love of yours will attract those kinds of people, those kinds of opportunities. In fact, I had the thought that just as a game, just think of this as a game, but very powerful game. Suppose you and five, six of your friends came together in a room. For 1 hour, you and five, six of your friends came together in a room. And you did a role play. And what's the role play? Six of you represent the council of the wisest people on this planet. Just take it as a thought experiment. You and five, six of your friends get together in a room. And you are the wisest people on this planet. You are what's called the council of elders. Not elders always in age, but elders in terms of your understanding of life. And now you have to discuss what is most needed for the planet at this time. Would that not shift your consciousness in a very fundamental way? Because it would shift your identity in a fundamental way. I resisted it for the longest time, but eventually I began watching Game of Thrones. And I learn a lot from Game of Thrones. So, for example, those of you who've seen it, there's this dwarf, Tyrion Lannister, and through a series of things, he becomes the what's called the hand of the king. So he's in a position where he's advising the king. He's like the prime minister, you could say, of a country. And while he's the hand of the king, his entire demeanor changes. He becomes very smart, very intelligent, even sometimes very cunning and shrewd. And he knows exactly how to make things work. Deep down, he wants the best for people. I found it fascinating that he's gone from being all distracted and all over the place and just fooling around to suddenly, when the responsibility came to him, he he rose to the occasion. He does a fantastic job. And it's a joy to watch him, how he outmaneuvers others and how he protects the kingdom from invading forces and everything. Because that's the identity he's taken up. I think there are two levels to this. Level one is recognizing that whatever you assume to be your identity, that's the kind of game you're going to play. If you say, oh, I'm just an employee in a company, what can I do? Well, that's the game you're going to play. Oh, I'm just a mother, I'm just a housewife, I'm just a student, I'm just a small business owner. That's the game you're going to play. Whatever you assume to be your identity, that's the game you're going to play. That's level one. And level two is really interesting, which is highly recommended for everybody. Whatever identity you've assumed, once in a while, take a holiday from that identity. Drop all your identity. Takes a little practicing because we're so used to being in the identity. So used to being, I'm a man, I'm an MBA, I'm an employee, I'm a teacher, I'm a this, I'm a that. And we don't realize the pressure this causes, the narrowness this causes in our life, the tightness this causes in our life, the conflict this causes in our life, the contradiction this causes in our life. Because yes, you are that, but you're not just that. If I was to put you in a room with five others and I was to proclaim, whether you believe it or not, you're the wisest person on this planet. The whole planet depends on you. In the beginning, you'd be confused But soon enough, that's how you would think and act and speak and behave. I have no doubt about that. Isn't this what we get inspired by in books, in movies, and TED Talks? People who discovered they were more than they imagined, either through circumstances, or through a friend, or through a guide, or through a teacher. They realize they're much more than they imagined themselves to be. And in some sense, also much less. You are that, and you are not that. So, for example, if I assume that just by sitting here and just by saying whatever's coming to my mind spontaneously and sometimes senselessly, not everything I'm saying lines up, it's not leading anywhere. What if I assume that just by doing that, a fundamental shift, a fundamental cleaning up of cobwebs happens in my heart and in the heart of everyone connected to this? What if I assume that? That while trying to accomplish nothing, something of great significance happened. Suppose I assume that. Yatha drishti tatha shrishti. If I assume that, then in some way it will be like that. The assumptions you have, are they supporting you or are they confining you? If you have to have an assumption, might as well have an assumption that liberates you. For example, when I go to give a talk, I'm often invited to give these talks. I can go with the assumption that, what's the point? People are all caught up in their lives. They'll come, they'll be listening half-heartedly, they'll be on their phone secretly, they'll pretend to listen, they'll not really listen. They'll go back, even if they're inspired, they'll forget in 1 or 2 hours. If I go with that assumption, it's going to be true. But suppose I go with the assumption that whether they're distracted or not, want to be there or not, like it or not, a profound and beautiful shift is going to happen in their life. Questions they didn't even know they had are going to get answered. What to speak of questions they had. And it's been my experience that if I go with that assumption, yatha drishti tatha shrishti, the way you see it is the way you experience it. Again and again, that's what happened. Just 2, 3 days back, I gave a talk. And one of the organizers said, I had come with such a long list of questions. But truly, I did not feel like asking even one. Everything is quiet. Everything is subtle. There's this book I read years back where the author says, one of the chapters is called How to Be the Smartest Person in the Room. And this is not an ordinary room he goes to. He goes to a room, he goes to a party. And this is like one of those very high level parties. So they're heads of state, A-list celebrities, some of the wealthiest, richest, most powerful people in the world in this room. Now, in a room like this, where everybody is a somebody, How to be the smartest person in the room? What a great question, first of all, isn't it? So he decided the way to be the smartest person in the room. Listen carefully, very important. The way to be the smartest person in the room is to assume he's the least smartest person in the room. Why? Because when he does that, he's willing to learn from everybody. So when he meets a military general who has run a war for 5 years in a different country with 5,000 troops, he asks them, how do you keep people motivated for 5 years in a different country in adverse conditions? Tell me about motivation. And he'll learn something. And he goes to that A-list actor who comes up with five blockbuster movies every year. And he says, I can barely even get my to-do list done. You're coming up with five blockbuster movies every year. What's your secret? How do you manage your time? He'll learn something there. And like this, every person he goes to, if he assumes he's less smart than them, he actually emerges smarter than them. Why? The one who's learning is smarter, isn't it? If you walk into the room trying to be the smartest person in the room, you walk out exactly the way you were. In other words, you didn't learn anything. But if you walk into the room, and this is not in an emotional, like, oh, I'm so terrible, not that way. It's like I'm willing to learn from everybody. Growth mindset. So how fascinating. The wise one learns from everyone. So at the end of those 2, 3 hours, he walked out of that room much smarter than before. And in some sense, he truly was the smartest person in that room. Where in your life, you'll have to reflect a bit. Where in your life have you found, at some points in your life, a kind of energy builds up, kind of enthusiasm builds up? Got to do something, got to learn something, got to achieve something, got to contribute something. It's like an inspired energy fills you up. Where in your life and when in your life has that happened? And actually, it's less important what that specific thing was. Maybe you wanted to learn something. Maybe you want to be with someone, go somewhere, experience something. But notice this. Every now and again, a certain energy builds up. I want to learn something. I want to do something. I want to create something. Like this morning, this energy built up, have this session. And I could have ignored it. I said, let's just do it. Let's see what happens. Spontaneous and senseless. Doesn't have to make sense. Doesn't have to help anybody. So it comes from nothing. This inspiration comes from nothing. Why is it that some of you are inspired to learn music or sing or learn a musical instrument or play a sport or research something? Why is it that someone wants to find ways to make more money? Someone wants to find ways to be more successful. Someone wants to be a healer. Someone wants to understand trauma. Someone wants to, learn some kind of a computer skill. Somewhere the inspiration came and it got you moving. It got you into action. And then something happened or didn't happen. And at some point, it dissipated. So it comes from nothing and it goes to nothing. And if in that entire cycle, if you can just not interfere so much, is it right or wrong? What will people say? Does it match my identity or not? If you can just allow that whole thing to happen without interfering, it's like you touch a kind of contentment, kind of peace, kind of freedom. I'll give you an example from my life. When I was living in the US, somehow I got fascinated with firearms, guns. No, my name is Nityashanti. I'm a vegan. Why should I be fascinated with guns? Maybe it was a place I was living in. A lot of people have guns there. So I ended up going to the shooting range. And I found it very enjoyable going to the shooting range, target practice. And I'm really enjoying this. And a part of me that you shouldn't be enjoying this. This is guns. These are weapons. This is you can get killed. This is the problem in the world. People have guns. America, so many people have mass shooting. And another part of me is enjoying it. If I bring in my moralistic side, oh, this is bad, I shouldn't do this. But the actual act of it, I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm finding it quite meditative. In fact, it demands all my attention, how to hold the gun, how to aim, and then you miss once in a while. So where was the technique wrong? So I spent a few months fully researching guns, going to the shooting alley. Like amazing. I was like, ye kahan se aa gaya? And then that also out. But what I love is that I allowed myself that. I didn't say, oh, I've been a monk, I'm a vegan, I'm a non-violent person. I just allowed myself to go through that. And it was complete. And as a result, I don't have strong judgments towards those who have guns. I understand where they're coming from. I understand their reasons. Which company is it? It's one of these elevator companies. They have a policy. It's one of the world's biggest, I'm forgetting the brand, one of the world's biggest elevator companies. And they have a policy that every single employee, no matter who they are, executive, secretary, salesperson, they have to spend 2 weeks on site. They have to see how elevators are installed. They have to see the process of installing an elevator, what that experience is like being on site. Because they believe if you're in this industry, you have to have actual experience. Otherwise, you're stuck in your head. You're selling a product you don't really understand. You're making decisions that you don't know how they affect the team on the ground. So whether they're the CEO, whether they're the secretary, whether it's a salesperson, everybody has to spend 2 weeks, put on the hard hat, put on those special shoes, which you can't get hurt if something falls on your foot. And you have to go on site and spend 2 weeks where the actual elevators are getting installed. I'm sure you'll be more of a liability to the team, but you have to. They'll give you some silly job to do. Do this. You don't know what you're doing, but you have to be there and you have to do that because that's what enables you later on. When you sell the products, you know what you're selling. When you talk to a customer, you know the challenges they face. You have a taste of it. And to me, this is real education, actually. If you look at education today, how much of it is just secondhand book-based learning? One of my friends, Hasmukh, he talks about how when we are born, So much of our brain is lit up. All the senses, the smell, the taste, the hearing, the touch, it's all lit up. But as we go along, education just focuses on seeing and hearing. Where in our education is there any smell? Where in our education is there any taste? Where in our education is any touch? It becomes so narrow, shutting down our senses. So, what is it like to allow yourself to just live, right? Tune in to what expands you, what makes you come alive. Also, tune in to what confuses you, the places you struggle. I would say it's not an accident. The place you struggle, the place you're confused, maybe it's in the area of relationships, maybe it's in the area of self esteem, maybe it's in the area of your mood, mental health, maybe it's in the area of physical health, maybe it's in the area of motivating yourself. You say, "Oh, I know so much, I have so many talents, but I don't know what to do." That's your big question. And I'm going to say it's not an accident. The things that expand you and the things that contract you, none of it is an accident. Suppose we start paying attention to that more than books and teachers and ideas about how you should be living your life. Something very grounded, very natural, very obvious over here. In some sense, this will lead to a very natural life, and I believe a very natural death. I find people who live this way tend to have natural lives and natural deaths, as opposed to unnatural lives, trying to live up to what your parents think you should be doing, what your community thinks you should be doing, what your country thinks you should be doing, what the world thinks you should be doing. These days, I've heard there are people who, content creators, they're called, and they will decide what content to create based on what's trending on Google. I've never really tried this, but there are certain parts of Google you can check what's trending these days. What are people thinking about, asking about? So they're creating all their content based on that. Oh, this is in fashion. This idea is in fashion. This question's in fashion. That's one way to do it. You keep waiting for the group consciousness to decide what you should be doing. What if you were to actually source it from within? What if you were to live in a more natural way? This lovely quote I read years back: to be yourself in a world that's trying its hardest, day and night, to make you everything else, is to fight the hardest battle you will ever fight and never stop fighting. Every day, from the moment you wake up till the moment you fall asleep, the world is trying to make you a certain way. Buy my product, dress like me, drive in me, live in this place, study me, learn me, do this, do that. Can you see how many messages you get throughout the day, nonstop? which is why you have to be actually quite careful of people like me, because we can very easily influence what you think is important. So I have to tread very carefully here, again and again, pointing back to you and say, don't even listen to me that much, right? And so a natural life and a natural death. Natural life, just being true to yourself. One important thing you'll do to de-hypnotize yourself, this is actually a very important exercise for all of us, and maybe it has to be done many times, is to ask yourself in all seriousness, what for me is success, fulfillment, happiness? What for me? What does success, fulfillment, happiness look like for me? Because if you don't ask that question, you will fall in the trap of what everyone is telling you. Oh, success is earning so much money, being on the cover of the magazines, being famous, being powerful, being rich, looking a certain way with so much plastic surgery, right? Dressing differently every time you come out of your house, giving a TED talk. That's success. Look carefully at all these people. Do they really inspire you? Maybe some of them do, but do all of them inspire you? Just because they have a lot of money, just because they have a lot of power, just because they look a certain way. In your heart of hearts, do you really believe that's what's good for you, best for you? What if you were to define success, fulfillment, happiness on your terms? It's a radical thing. How come in school they don't ask us this question? Sit down, just one essay in your entire school life. What for you is success? What for you is happiness? How come they tell us success is getting so many marks in your board exam, going to so and so college, getting so and so job, earning so and so money, living in so and so part of the world? How come they tell you this? How come they don't ask you this? By those standards, those teachers only are unsuccessful. What are they going to teach us? Sometimes parents come to me and say, kids don't listen. Tell them to study. They don't listen. Of course, they won't listen. They look at you. You've done all those studies. You've gone to all those colleges. You've had all those jobs. And they look at you. You're so frustrated. Why would I want to do that? It's a very valid question. They're very suspicious of you. So to ask yourself the question again and again and again, truly, what is success for me? And the answers may change. The answers may get refined as you go through your life. But if you don't ask that question, because you get so much messaging all the time, consciously and unconsciously, you will start to feel that something's missing in you, something's wrong with you, because you don't have X number of followers on social media, because you don't have X amount of influence, haven't written X amount of number of books, not being interviewed by X, not contributing X, not doing X, not touching X lives. So this is a radical thing. And maybe it is that. For some people, they know I do want to earn a lot of money and I do want to be famous. And fantastic. At least you know it, right? Nothing wrong in that. But at least it's coming from wholeheartedness. So no rights and wrongs here. Sometimes you need to experience things before you can genuinely move beyond them. Like I've traveled to many parts of the world. So travel is not such a big deal for me. I've met many very rich, powerful people, influential, famous people. So meeting rich, powerful, influential people is not a big deal to me. I've done some of these things, so it doesn't really, it's not a big deal for me. For some persons, it's a really big deal. So you have to go, maybe you have to just go through that. Sometimes you can, through wisdom, you can bypass it, but sometimes you have to just go through the experience. There's no other way. If you really imagine a certain romantic relationship will make you happy, a certain amount of money will make you happy, being admired, loved, respected will make you happy. You have to just go through that. I once wrote this on Facebook that ordinary people want to be famous. Famous people want to be legendary. You see, famous is not enough nowadays. You can come in one movie and you can be forgotten. You can write one book and you can be forgotten. Famous as you can have one viral video, then you can be forgotten. So famous is not enough. You have to be legendary. So ordinary people want to be famous. Famous people want to be legendary. Legendary people want to be wise. So once you're already a legend, now what? Once you're already an A.R. Rahman or a Amitabh Bachchan or you're top in your whatever field, now you want to be wise. And what do wise people want? Just want to be ordinary. पूरा चक्कर लगा दिया. It's so true when they say that at the end of all your journeys, all your traveling, you come back to the place you began and you see it for the first time. At the end of all your journeys, you're no longer interested in any journey. One thing very fascinating I found when I was living in Thailand, and to some extent I've seen this in India as well. When I was living in Thailand, there was a phenomena where monks would go and train in a certain monastery with a certain teacher. Then after many years, they would start traveling. They would travel and teach all over the country. And at some point, somewhere in their 50s, 60s, they'd usually come back to their home village and they'd set up their base there and they'd live there for the rest of their life. And Osho actually said this once. Osho made sense when he said this. He said, spiritual people will go through a Rajasic phase and a Sattvic phase. What's a Rajasic phase? A phase of traveling, teaching, trying to propagate, reaching, spreading their message. So you go through that phase of a lot of activity, a lot of travel, a lot of teaching, a lot of things, and eventually you usually come back to a place close to your home, and then you just settle there. The Sattvic. Now instead of you reaching out, the world comes to you. And I found that very fascinating. That there's a larger law to this as well. There's a larger principle to this as well. So you will have a phase of, you'll be tamasic, you'll be confused, distracted, all of that. Oh my goodness, where am I? Nothing is happening in my life. That's also needed actually. You need to go through that period of, total confusion, what's happening. Everybody else is moving forward, I'm stuck. But you need to go through that. That's the rich soil. That's the cow dung from which the beautiful plant will emerge. And then there'll be a period of stretching out, reaching out. Then there'll be a period of coming back, settling. So at the end of all your traveling and journeying, you'll come back to the place you began. You'll see it for the first time. In other words, after all your learning, all your traveling, you will come back to be in a room similar to the one you're in now, sitting on a seat similar to the one you're sitting on now. And you will be completely at ease, completely quenched. Nothing will be out of place. Nothing will be missing in your life. Nothing in excess. Nothing is missing. This is what it means to live naturally and die naturally. You will live effortlessly and you will die effortlessly. There'll not be too much drama. A little bit of drama is needed for entertainment, but there'll not be too much of drama, either in your life or in your death. And you'll not take things so seriously. You'll not take your own personality so seriously. Your personality will have its kinks. Right? Nobody has a smooth personality. Some of them appear to have, but if you get very close to them, you realize that nobody really has. Even these wisest people, you get very close and you realize they've also got their own little personality quirk. Everybody has it. Your personality will have its quirks, likes and dislikes, preferences, opinions, stickiness. It's all right. You don't take it so seriously. You don't make a big deal out of it. You don't believe that's you. That's just an expression. 1,000 ancestors on the left, 1,000 ancestors on the right. Mother's side and father's side. Nichoro all of them, and you get this. The juice of 1,000 ancestors from both sides. It's a strange phenomenon, this personality. Behaves in some funny ways. Has some strange things it likes and doesn't like: food, habits, sexual preferences. Did you know that almost everybody's got a kink? Research found that almost no one is straight. Everyone got some kink, some funny thing or the other going on. It's good to know that. Otherwise, you think something's wrong with you. We made it so tight. So, what's it like to relax and trust what makes you come alive, and also trust what confuses you, troubles you, bothers you? There's important information there. Be radical enough to define success for yourself, fulfillment for yourself, happiness for yourself, again and again and again. Have the courage to be misunderstood, judged, disliked, disrespected. Have that courage. If you try to fit in too much, you are going to judge yourself, you are going to dislike yourself, you are going to misunderstand yourself, and you will lose respect for yourself. So have the courage to be misunderstood, judged, disliked. That's the price you have to pay. And play the game of your identity, like I suggested a game a little while back. Sit with 5 or 6 friends in a room and say, okay, for 1 hour, we are the wisest people on this planet. We are the council of elders. Everything depends on us. You will notice your entire thinking changes. The way your love expands, the way your compassion expands, the way your understanding expands. Next level. Why? Because your identity shifted. This is a fun game. In the Buddhist tradition, they have this concept of tulku. Tulku is a young boy. Sometimes it's girls as well. Usually it's boys. That's a patriarchal system. So it's a young boy who is identified as a reincarnate Lama. The reincarnate Lama, some great spiritual practitioner, has been reborn. Now, I believe even if you mistakenly identify a wrong boy, he's not really the reincarnate Lama, but he's treated like that. They believe that he's wise. They believe he's compassionate. They believe he's exceptional. He's given that kind of training. You think he'll not become like that? He will become like that. She will become like that. She has to. Yatha drishti, tatha shrishti. So in this spontaneous and senseless session, if I see within each of you something amazingly spontaneous, something that doesn't need to make sense, something that doesn't need validation, approval from anybody else, then I have passed on this virus to all of you successfully. And you no longer have to be so careful. Are people going to like what I say or not? Are they going to approve what I say or not? Are they going to agree with what I say or not? Will it be successful or not? Will it be popular or not? We should be careful of trying to benefit others. Much, if you read the history of the world, much of the trouble of the world has come from people trying to benefit others, trying to save their souls. Dear God, save the world from all those who are trying to save the world. People who try to save the world create the most mischief. Today's problems, you know what today's problems are? Yesterday's solutions. Look at your own life. What you thought yesterday would be a solution has become the new problem. You thought getting that job will solve everything. It became a problem. You thought getting that relationship would solve everything. Now this is the new challenge. Yesterday's solution are today's problem. So be curious, be interested in your own life journey. Something there are a lot of hints over there. Reflect, question. Sabki suno man ki karo. Listen to everybody. With a lot of skepticism, even with me, you should with a lot of skepticism. You shouldn't agree to everything I say. Just because I say it in a nice way with stories and everything. You shouldn't agree. I may be passing on my limitations to you for all you know. So, sabki suno, man ki karo. Listen to everybody and then follow what for you makes you come alive. Trust your process. Be quiet for a bit. So a certain energy built up in me even as I was sleeping tonight. And it led me to offering this, whatever you want to call it, And in a way, it's coming from nothing. It has no purpose. It's touching, it's directed to something in you that's no one and nothing. And even though this is nothing talking to nothing, there will be something that happens as a result. Because the moment anything happens in this world, some ripples get created. And for some reason, I was guided to call it episode 1. There might be more episodes. You don't know. Let's see. So don't make a big effort to try to remember what was said. Whatever needed to happen has already happened. If something needed to happen, it's happened. If nothing needed to happen, that's also great. Beautiful. The nothing in me bows to the nothing in you. The something in me bows to the something in you. The everything in me bows to the everything in you. May this be a successful, fulfilling, and happy day of your life on your terms. May you be fully alive. And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you.